Welcome to our monthly Charter School Investor podcast, What Charter School Leadership Looks Like. Each month, we meet with leaders in the charter school sector to better understand how they land the plane while it's still being built. Our guest today, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Smedley of the United States Marine Corps and the CEO of Arkansas Military and First Responders Academy. Uh, Colonel Smedley and I have known each other for a couple of years as he launched into going from leading a battalion to leading a school, a startup high school, no less, in Little Rock, Arkansas. I wanted to see if I could, Colonel Smedley, just start a little bit with your perspective on leadership. And even before that, the journey that got you to where you are. Now, I did have the pleasure of, I'll still remember, after our first board meeting of getting to actually talk to your dad, who I imagine may come into this story. But tell us a little bit about your childhood and growing up in Arkansas and the role models that you may have had that influenced your career.
Hey, well, first, I just want to say appreciate you having me on. It has been a pleasure, getting to know you and our relationship as it's evolved. And I just want to give you some credit for, where I am today. You played a big part in my development and education. So I just want to get that out there first. As far as my childhood, many, many years ago, uh, I was a child and grew up here in Little Rock, Arkansas. My parents came from Southern Arkansas, multiple siblings, not the strongest economic financial background, but my parents had passion and desire for not only helping their family, but helping the community. And so they were able to move to Little Rock. My dad was smarter than most, including myself. And he used education as a means to escape poverty. And, you take a kid from Huddock, Arkansas, one of the most southern rural towns in the entire state, also where the famed Daisy Bates was from. And he was able to graduate top of his class in high school, able to go to college, able to go to law school. And he was actually the first law student of, at the time, Professor Bill Clinton. Later, that became his mentor. They developed a relationship, and he eventually became the deputy prosecuting attorney for the state of Arkansas when Bill Clinton was governor. Also, one of his mentors was Chris Mercer, one of the first African Americans to graduate from the University of Arkansas School of Law. And so my mom, she was a registered nurse for over 20 years. And so she has a natural passion for helping people. And so when you grow up with Carolyn Smedley and James Smedley as your parents, you are expected to give back. You're expected to work and you're expected to give back. And so that's something that's always been instilled in me, whether that's volunteering at what we call the local watershed as a child, even on my Christmas breaks. My mom would drop me off to assist families in need. But it's always been a passion of mine to help people. And so I'm grateful for my parents. Not only were they the role models, but I had great educators from Mr. Fian, my principal in elementary school, Dr. Lacey, my principal in junior high school, and also Dr. Dees, who was my principal in high school. And those three really played an integral part in my growth and my development, as well as several teachers from Miss Knight to Miss Madison. But I'm grateful for my experience, my peers, and my community, my church. My church is like family to me. And so all of those elements have played into me being who I am today. And it just let me know when people think like, well, do you think you do too much? And I'm like, absolutely not. After everything that's been invested in me, I feel a personal obligation to give back and to play my part in influencing and making sure that we continue to progress Arkansas education.
Sure. With that start and those parents, I'm sure if you ever misbehaved, there was a race to see who would knock you upside of the head. But from the way I know you now, I'm trying to wonder whether, and I know you went on to Howard University from your town, which probably didn't happen very often that somebody would go to an excellent, institution with such historic foundations as that. But growing up, were you I'm trying to picture you as, um, the guy in the front row, cleaning the erasers for teachers, and I just can't picture that. What were you like?
I was not. I was a decent student, so I knew to be respectful. I knew to have fun as well, and I was a jokester at times. But when I got to junior high school, this is when a lot of gang culture from Chicago infiltrated Little Rock, and it was a very violent time frame, and it was something that Little Rock and Arkansas as a whole was not prepared for, and so it played a huge part in how we developed, and um, I experienced it firsthand with how my peers were evolving, and it was a challenging time, and I could have said I could have gone the wrong route. But thankfully, I had a strong foundation. I had people who made sure I stayed on the right path and also had a lot of blessings and protection from God. So that helped me get through, the junior high and the high school times. But it was definitely something that I don't take for granted. The teachers and the family and the community that I had to help me through that. So.
Yeah, well, as you're saying that, it makes me think, Jason, just as I've come to know you, you have a very strong way of encouraging people around you and supporting them in the way they want to be supported. You mentioned your faith, which is always an interesting topic for me because I never understand whether when somebody feels something from their religious background, if they feel like something is being destined to happen or if they have the values that they learn from their church, from their religious institution, and then that goes forward and informs how they treat people through their life.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. I've had a lot of testimonial experiences, and those experiences have allowed me to realize that God has things planned for me to help other people. I have a saying now. Um, I don't aim to be a great man or accomplish great things. I just want to be a part of God's greatness. And I think as long as I stay in that mindset, I'm on the right path. I'll just give you a brief example. When I left Arkansas, I moved to DC for an internship. And I actually didn't move. I was just supposed to go for the internship, but I love DC. I love public service. DC has been my favorite city. And so to actually be on Capitol Hill and work for a congressman who also was a Marine and an attorney and an MD was really special for me. And I made the choice of not going back to Arkansas. I'm staying up here. I was not done with college. The chief of staff, Ed Fry, said, "Hey, what are you going to do? You need to finish college." I said, "Well, I was just going to work on Capitol Hill." And he said, "You need to finish college and you need to apply to a school called Howard University." So I researched the school and I was interested in it. And so I went to Howard, and it was a summer internship. So it's the middle of July. And I go there and I said, "Hey, I want to go to your school." And the faculty said, "Well, we stopped taking applications in April, and there is no way that you could come to the school now. We're not accepting any applications. Like, you need to go to another school. You need to look at some other options, but Howard's not for you right now." And something in me, and I don't know where it came from because I never asked these kind of questions, but I said, "Do you make the final decision?" And I don't even know where that question came from. And they said, "Well, no." I don't personally make the final decision. I said, well, who does? And they said, the dean. And I said, well, where is the dean's office? And they told me where it was, but they emphasized like, hey, like, you're not going to be able to go with Howard. You need to make some other, you need to look at some other options. So I went to the dean's office and I asked to see the dean, and they said, well, do you have an appointment? No, I don't. Well, he's not in right now, but you can wait on him and see if he's available. So I sat there for 2.5 hours looking at a Southern Living magazine back and forth because, we didn't have smartphones back then. And when he came in, the secretary said, well, that young man's here to see you. And he said, I'll be with you in a minute. And it was another 40 minutes. And then when I went into his office, he said, how can I help you? And I said, well, I'm Jason Smedley. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. I recently joined the Marines. I just finished an internship here in DC, and I want to finish my college journey at Howard University. I have a lot of lessons learned. I know I don't have the best transcript, but if you give me a chance, I will be a Howard graduate and I will make Howard proud. And all I need is one semester to prove myself. And if you give me that, I promise you, I will not let you down. And surprisingly, he allowed me to uh, join Howard. And if it was an impossible feat, I don't think I could get away with it today. I don't think I could have gotten away with a week after that's the scenario. But I've had opportunities like that where I've just had to give an extra push and they worked in my favor.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I finished college and applied to law school, which I know you went to law school, University of Arkansas as well. And, I got rejected from these schools almost quicker than I got off the applications. So I went down to, I called the dean at University of Virginia, the law school there, and I said, I'm going to be in Charlottesville next week, which I'm only coming down to meet with you. And could I have a few minutes of your time? So I had an appointment with the dean. And Dean Stokes said to me, so, Alan, what can I do for you? And I said, well, you know more about the University of Virginia admissions than I do, but there's been a terrible mistake. And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, I read all your materials and, you know, I got rejected, and I'm not sure that's a mistake. You know that better than me. But in your materials, it looked like you were interested in half of your class based on numbers and half on what they've done. And I've worked in the State Department. I've traveled with a presidential campaign, worked in prison. There are people more interesting than me, but you didn't even read my application." And
Wow.
he said, "Wait right here." And he went and he
Wow.
got my application, and then that's where you went. So sometimes, you can't take no for an answer, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. I always say, never accept the first no.
Oh,
Unless you're on a date.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Thing I wanted to understand is really reflecting on your journey. Are there any opportunities that you missed out on that you would want others to have? Or are you really sort of effectively with AMFRA, your high school, creating those opportunities?
Well, I think that's a great question. There were some opportunities. Looking back, I wish I had exposure on. And so, for instance, since becoming a Marine, I've learned a lot about aviation. And currently, I'm the squadron commander of an aviation support unit squadron. And to see all the pilots and see, like, the process of how we support aviation, I definitely would have had interest as a teenager had I received exposure to it, as well as becoming a doctor. Very intrigued with medicine, but I just didn't have that kind of exposure as a teenager. And so, what I have done with AMFRA, I've learned that most schools go on 1 or 2 field trips a year. That's very normal. That's average. Alan, I don't know if I told you this. We went on over 10 field trips in one
Oh,
year, over 10. And that's not including all of the guest speakers we've had. have realized that exposure and opportunities is absolutely necessary for high school teenagers. And so with the cadets, I asked them, hey, how many of you are interested in being a lawyer? Not a lot of hands went up. And I said, why not? I don't know. And so, you know what? We're going to do a field trip to the law school, and you're going to meet lawyers. You're going to meet judges. You're going to meet law students. But how do you know you don't want to be a lawyer if you've never had that interaction, that understanding? How do you know you don't want to go to medical school if you've never met a doctor? And so I had a doctor come in as a guest speaker. How do you know you don't want to be a police officer if you've never met a police officer? So let's go to the police station. Let's go to the fire station. Let's go to MIMS. Let's go to the emergency medical services. Let's go to the Little Rock Air Force Base. I'm going to bring a pilot in to speak to you. I'm going to bring generals in to speak to you. I'm going to bring the U.S. Senator to speak to you, the mayor of Little Rock. But I'm going to get you exposure so that you can make a well-informed decision, so you can articulate why you don't want to do something and why you do want to do something else. So,
Yeah, interesting. Well, as you're saying that, I can't tell if and I want to talk about leadership. And I know you've learned a lot about leadership, in the Marines, but I'm trying to match that with, the way you're leading this school where you're really empowering students to, make their own decision.
mhm. Well, I started my career off in the Marine Corps, enlisted. So I started off as a private first class. And as a Lance Corporal, I deployed as the most junior Marine in my unit. And this is when the war in Iraq first kicked off. And so, um, had a lot of tough jobs. And I learned that a lot of humility comes from doing these tough, lowly jobs. I remember my good leadership and I remember the not so good leadership. And it was the good leadership that got me through the challenging time. And so I took mental note of it. And they let me realize that I could potentially be an officer and lead them one day. And they encouraged me and empowered me. And so when I became an officer and I got into leadership positions, I wanted to make sure I took care of junior Marines. I want to make sure that I didn't focus so much about my upward progression, but more so on making sure they had their upward progression. And if I take care of Marines, that they would in fact make sure that they provide me the support that I need. And that has served me well throughout my Marine Corps career. And transitioning that over to AMFRA, what I like to do is I like to empower my staff. And I always believe that you can delegate tasks, but you can't delegate responsibility. So the responsibility of the school is mine. But I want to empower them to, especially to my teachers. Hey, this is your classroom. This is your world. So when I enter their classroom, the first thing I do is I always acknowledge the teacher, always acknowledge them. And I ask them, may I sit in on your class? May I borrow this student? Are they available right now? But I always remind them that this is your world, and whatever you decide in your world, in your classroom, that's what's going to happen. And when it comes to the faculty, I just want them to know that I try to emphasize with them that, they have a place here at AMFRA, and their part in the overall picture plays an intricate part in the success of the school. And when it comes to the cadets, the same thing. I want them to take ownership of the school. It's their school. This is our first year. Well, now we're going into our second year. And so I want them to think, what do you want your high school experience to be? And you help develop that. For example, they want to have a spring formal. Great. You want music? Today's generation doesn't see like much of dancers, but hey, we'll have a spring formal. If you want to stand around and play on your phones, you can, but we will have a DJ. We will do it all for you. But we want them to enjoy their high school experience. And so, we give them opportunities for keeping accountability, keeping order, as well as the upperclassmen, reinforcing some of the guidelines and rules we have to their junior counterparts. And so
Sure.
they seem to embrace that. And for them to take on leadership really brings out another side of their personality.
As you're saying that, it makes me think about the Arkansas Military and First Responders Academy and those students. And I wonder if there's an instance you can think of where there was impact of a student on you or, or a group of students, given, what your journey had been to date. And you have the makings of an educator just by the way you go about being so supportive of, the teachers without even being conscious of it. That very permission that you ask, is a step that many would miss,
Mhm.
but, not a colonel.
Yeah.
Uh, but where's an instance where, you've learned something from the students?
Well, I'd have to say, so there's three things I commit to every cadet. One is their safety. Safety's paramount. Got to make sure every cadet is safe. Secondly, well, I'll skip to the second because that gets back to the story. The third thing is making sure they have a plan after graduation. When they walk across that stage, we have an agreed upon realistic plan of what you're going to do after you graduate. But the second portion is I got to challenge every cadet. Got to challenge. I got to make sure that they leave school better than they were when they came. And so a lot of times the cadets are hesitant about being challenged because they're a little nervous about it. It's something that they naturally want to avoid. For example, may have a cadet who may have a hard time running. And so they may run a little bit and want to stop. And so what do? Come on, we're just going to run a little further today. I want you to keep up with me. Just stay beside me. I'm going to make sure that we get through this together. I'm not yelling at them, but I'm encouraging them. And so when they see that they're able to do a little more, they want to be challenged. Let's do it again. When are we going to go for a run again? And it started to click in my head that once they see that I'm encouraging them and they're able to make progress, they want to be challenged some more. And so as I continue to help them run, then it comes to a point where it's like, I think I can beat you, sir. I'm like, oh, okay, we're getting there now. And I love um, the interest and when you plant that seed of like you can be challenged and you can grow and you can be better and you can evolve, that they embrace that. And it's not just with physical activity, it's like with math, getting them a tutor and just seeing their progress. And then I'm like, and then hearing them in the first place saying, I have a hard time with math too. Hey sir, look, I got a B on my test, and I'm like, that's outstanding. He's like, yeah, it's all right, but I really want an A. And it's like, yes, that's the kind of passion. Let's work towards getting an A. And so seeing them embrace the challenge motivates me to continue to encourage them.
Yeah, it sounds like as you tell me that story, at one level, you're empowering them to change their view of themselves and what they're capable
Mhm.
of,
Yep.
which is kind of incredible to a growth mindset. Just in terms of growth, I feel like this your second year. Now you're adding, you've got ninth graders and 10th graders. I believe you're well over 200 cadets at this point. Tell me, what did you learn on your first year in the job?
I learned a lot. I learned that one, the superintendent position requires me to have a lot of focus administratively and financially and having a broader understanding of the educational world and how it impacts my school and the community. That is a process that I think I will continue to learn and evolve as I go. I've also learned that even though I'm new to education, and most superintendents have over a decade, probably 2 decades of educational experience to include the formal education of PhDs in the world of education. And I don't possess those same attributes. However, now that I'm in the position, no one cares. No one cares because if you're in a position, I'm expected to work at the same level as they are. I get no passes. And so I have had to rise to the challenge and make sure I have the same knowledge and I execute the same way any superintendent does who has 20 years of experience. And so that is what I have pushed myself to do. I've also learned that education isn't always about meeting a grade level standard, but it's also about, and this comes from my principal, Dr. Duran, who's been amazing. It has come about the growth of a student. How is that student growing? And he has changed my mindset to focus on the individual growth of each particular cadet and how that impacts the overall school and the progress and standard that we set here at AMFRA. And so
But
those
with the
those are
growth,
two big lessons
yeah,
learned.
well, as you talk about growth in the School Improvement Partnership database, we measure for every charter school in the country, not academic achievement, academic growth,
Mhm.
because that's really the key metric. So, how has AMFRA fared in that way in terms of the growth academically of your ninth graders?
Well, that's a great thing. And so our first year was actually ninth and 10th. So
Okay.
this year is actually ninth through 11th, but our ninth and 10th graders, they were able to grow 2 academic years in math and 3 academic years in reading. And so that has been mind blown. And I owe all the credit to Dr. Duran and our faculty because they have really invested from the first testing to the last testing, ensuring that our cadets continue to grow. Dr. Duran, who's known for his long ponytail, said, if you grow more than 80%, then I will cut my hair. Sure enough, our last semester, at the end of the school year, the cadets were able to cut his hair. So he has a brand new haircut. Uh, but that's the kind of memories that I've been able to have our first year. So I was really grateful that he was able to make that happen. I think that exceeded all of our expectations.
Well, as I turn to what lies ahead, sort of as you see things and for AMFRA's journey and yours as a leader, one thing that occurs in my mind is the future of military and first responders focused education and its role in the broader education landscape. It feels to me just in the work we've been doing nationally through School Improvement Partnership, there's more interest in having a relationship between high school and the career opportunities that lay ahead for students.
Mhm. So, I think that this model will continue to grow. We already have other cities that are interested in having a AMFRA in their area. And so that's something we're working on as well. So what I see is that we are realizing that uh, for some they're realizing that college is not the only avenue for success and that you have other opportunities. While we are a college prep school, so we do have a STEM program focusing on coding, cybersecurity, pre-engineering for those who want to go to college. But you also have other opportunities. You have great opportunities with trade schools. You have great opportunities with first responders and the military. And again, it's about exposure. And those are outlets and organizations that are looking to hire, looking for new cadets and looking for opportunities. And so we're able to provide a channel for those organizations. Our police department, our state troopers, even the FBI are looking at high schools to build those relationships with so that when they graduate, they can continue their process and, in fact, become a member of their organization. And so we just look to be a pathway for our cadets. And it has served us well. We have so much community support. And it's not just coming in and doing a workshop, but it's actually being integrated in our curriculum. We have a memorandum of understanding with Arkansas Tech University, who will be assisting in some of our EMS classes, and that will allow our cadets to get dual credit for not only high school, but also for college. And then we're also working with a local police department who will be teaching some of our law enforcement courses. And that will allow cadets to have an internship with the police departments. And after they graduate, they can become a police cadet. And once they turn 21, then they can go to the actual police academy. And so we want to build those kind of relationships and opportunities. And I say the last piece is getting our young teenagers better understanding of the financial world. Whether it's, we have a worksheet that I saw in one of the classes where it was like, how much do you think food costs every month? How much for your living, your mortgage or your apartment, and some of the answers, how much you think a car costs, your transportation, and the answers are alarming. The answers are alarming, and so getting them a realistic understanding of how much it costs to live in the world as an adult, and providing them with realistic opportunities on how not to only survive in the world, but to excel and to enjoy life and play an intricate part in the community. I think is really special.
Oh, it is, and that was the other piece that you mentioned early in our discussion that I wanted to circle back to with AMFRA, which is that, with an eye towards fulfilling the leadership vision you have, AMFRA graduates are not only gonna spur economic development in Arkansas, but I think there's an opportunity, and this is the way I think charter schools can excel, to impact underserved communities and the neighborhoods from which they may come.
Hmm.
And because they become the agents for change.
Right. Hmm. So, we work with, it's been interesting because I remember the first year when we were getting started, I had a parent ask me, what type of student comes to AMFRA? And I thought that was a good question. I was like, what type? I was like, well, any student interested in excelling their education, looking for a new opportunity. But I didn't want to single it out or limit to this type of student. And so, because of that, we have cadets from every geographical area in Central Arkansas. I know you may not know it, but from Jacksonville, Arkansas to Bryan, Arkansas, which is on two completely ends of Central Arkansas, not only from a geographical area, but also from a school component, whether we have cadets from private schools, charter schools, home schools, public schools, all under one roof. And then we have a diverse background, socioeconomic background. And we have them all under one roof from all these different backgrounds. And that also includes race and ethnicity. Last year we were 30% Black, 30% white, 30% Hispanic, 10% Asian, and other. And so when you add all those pieces together, we were and still are a very diverse community. And when it comes to gender, we had I'd say about 30% girls to about 70% males. And the girls have increased since last year. So we'll probably be between 35, 40% girls this year. And so when you take all these backgrounds, you still want to ensure that each of them are provided the same quality education that they deserve. And I always want to emphasize that these kids deserve it. And also take into consideration the second and third order effects of, are they hungry? Do they have stresses, at home? How are they dealing with that? How are they getting to and from school? Do they have everything they need to be successful at school? And so that's why, we have our morning breakfast, we have our lunch, and we have our free and reduced lunch and breakfast for those cadets. We have after school activities. We provide a variety of options for transportation. If their parents can't take them, we have our own, bus system. Excuse me. But we also have partnered with the public transportation. So every cadet is able to ride the bus for free. And that's not just to and from school. If they have a weekend job, they can use the bus as well. And so we try to look at every aspect. And that's one reason why I emphasize that we don't want cadets paying for anything at the school. So free tuition, free uniforms, free laptops, and free backpacks. Nothing is coming out of pocket for the cadet or the parent because we want to make sure that when they step on campus, their focus is just on education. I always say I have two things I expect of every cadet. Got to get your education, or as my grandmother would say, got to get your lesson, got to get your lesson. And number two, every cadet, have fun. Have fun. I want high school to be fun. And so you have to want it too. And so I believe both of those components allow students to come in receptive, focused, and able to enjoy their high school experience.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got your grandmother in there because Lord
Yeah,
knows we're only doing what we're doing on the shoulders of those who go before us. Uh,
absolutely.
all right, well, I just want to wrap up by I was going to quote one of my favorite authors, Abraham Verghese, in his book Cutting for Stone. He says this: "You live life forward, but understand it backward." What is it that you understand now as a leader, a charter school leader, that you wish you knew soon?
Well, one, as a tangible thing, I wish I knew my staff earlier because I would have brought them on a lot earlier for the planning piece. But I would say that, um, that I have to have, I wish I had a little more reassurance that we were going to make it through the first year. And I had to deal with some new experiences. For some, it was a little tougher to acclimate to the AMFRA culture. And so, one lesson I learned is I had to do a better job of acclimating cadets. And so, we had a more thorough orientation. And we're going to start the school year off a little slower just to get everyone acclimated to AMFRA culture and make sure that they are prepared for what lies ahead. And also, I want to continue to have more opportunities for discussions with faculty. I want to listen to them. I want to make sure that they don't feel like they are just there to teach, but to help the school evolve. Hey, what can we do better? What can I do better? How can I help you? What can I do for you? And I want to make sure that they hear those questions more consistently and that I'm able to get them the support that they need so that they can do what's necessary to teach our cadets. And I think taking those lessons learned and putting them into action, I think it's going to make for a great school year this year.
Well, that is what charter school leadership looks like. Uh, Colonel Smedley, Jason, my friend, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. It's great to see you again.